Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio. It's 2016. We started working on this issue 10 years ago after becoming aware of how extensive the payday lending industry had gotten to be at that point in time, and how many people were being caught in a cycle of endless debt. We sort of joined with other consumer advocates across the state to push for legislation to rein in payday lending. The General Assembly, 2 years later, after a big push, finally enacted legislation, and we were dealing with this, as our sign says, an annualized interest rate of 391% on these loans. The legislation that was passed capped that rate at 28%, and that was inclusive of all interest and fees. But the payday lenders responded quickly with a referendum to take that issue to the ballot. But the voters saw through their lies and deceit and overwhelmingly rejected their referendum and actually approved the legislation that the legislature had passed. In fact, 2/3 of Ohio voters said no to payday lenders and yes to consumer protection. Voters in 87 of Ohio's 88 counties agreed. But that victory was short-lived. Soon after that new rate cap took effect, the payday lenders got creative with new means of extorting money from people, issuing loans as checks and then charging ridiculous fees to cash those checks, operating under the Mortgage Loan Act. How would they get away with that, one could ask. And then they also posed as consumer service organizations or credit service organizations and charged ridiculous fees on top of their loans. So they came up with new ways to gouge people. We saw the emergence of more car title loans, where instead of holding a person's check, post-dated check as collateral, they held the title to someone's car. So the payday lending debt trap is alive and well in Ohio as a result of all the various ways they found to get around the law that was passed. In fact, the Consumer Financial Bureau's new research showed that 89% of the payday loans in Ohio are taken within 60 days of the previous loan being repaid. But 73% of the loans that are taken out the same day as the previous loan is paid off. So that just shows there's many people into a cycle of debt. 75% of all the payday lenders' fees come from loans of borrowers that are stuck in more than 10 loans per year. So this notion that this is about helping consumers get over an emergency, well, that's an awful lot of emergencies. The fact is, they're trapping people in a cycle of debt that drained nearly $503 million from desperate Ohioans in 2015 alone. And that that's more than twice what it was in 2008 when the legislation in Ohio was passed. So the good news is the story doesn't end there. The CFPB decided to take on payday lending as one of the areas they wanted to regulate with their new powers at the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Our own Rich Cordray is there. Back when he was Attorney General, he was extremely helpful in the fight that took place in Ohio, and he's trying to move that forward in stopping the debt trap in his new role. So to talk about that, I want to go to Kalitha Williams from Policy Matters, who's going to tell us some of the details about what's in the new rule.
Thank you, Bill. My name is Kalitha Williams, and I'm the Policy Liaison for Asset Building for Policy Matters Ohio. We welcome the efforts of the Consumer Federal Protection Bureau to rein in the industry. Last Thursday's proposed rule will impact traditional payday, car title, and installment loans. Provisions of the rule will help consumers, but there are weaker areas that need to be strengthened. The better components include requiring lenders to consider a borrower's ability to repay the loan and providing new protections for borrowers' bank accounts. These high-cost loans are made with little or no underwriting to determine that they can afford them. Borrowers spiral into a debt trap when they can't pay back the loan in full and are forced to keep refinancing and incurring staggering fees. In 2014, the CFPB reported that 80% of payday loans are refinanced between 14 and 30 days. The principle of ensuring that a consumer can pay back the loan and meet household expenses is a core tenet of the proposed rule. We're familiar that payday lenders collect payments by electronic withdrawals from the borrower's account or post-dated checks. But when there is not enough money in the account, this practice has left consumers paying steep overdraft fees or even having their bank accounts closed. The CFPB's own research found that half of online payday loan borrowers racked up several bank fees. Their average fees are $185. The proposed rule would require lenders to send a written notice to borrowers notifying them of the upcoming withdrawal. And it would also limit the lender to 2 attempts to collect payment from the borrower's account before they would have to go back and ask for reauthorization. Now let's talk about some of the challenges. There are areas of the proposed rule that definitely need to be strengthened. First, requiring the ability to repay criteria on every loan. The proposed rule has exceptions that would allow a consumer to take out up to 6 loans before this provision is required. But one unaffordable loan can have dire consequences to Ohio families. Next, increasing protections against loan flipping or refinancing. The CFPB's initial proposal required a 60-day cooling off period for short-term loan sequences of 3 consecutive loans, and now it's been cut to 30 days before another loan can be offered. This increases the time that a borrower stays in debt. More protections are also needed to limit long-term loan refinancing, which can incur even higher fees than short-term loans. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, closing the so-called business-as-usual loophole. The proposed rule allows lenders to use past payment procedures, and that's using account debits or post-dated checks, as evidence that the borrower is able to repay loans. Unfortunately, borrowers have no choice in these transactions and may be left with little to pay their household expenses, which defeats the spirit of the requirement. We're thankful that the CFPB is working to protect consumers from payday lender abuses. The proposed rule offers important protections. However, we believe more can be done to make the rules stronger. We will continue to work with the CFPB and other advocates in Ohio and across the country to help develop a rule that will guard the financial stability of Ohio families. Thank you.